Hello and welcome to episode 10 of ARChat. Yes, we're into double digits. I'm your host, as always, Stephen Dickens. I'm joined by my co-host, Crystal Golightly and Nathan Herman. And this week, we've got Alyssa Stone from WIZ. Hey, Alyssa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen.
So let's do some introductions. We've just been chatting off camera. That's why we were all smiling when we joined. But just get the listeners and viewers orientated. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what you do for WIZ.
Awesome. So I am the head of analyst relations for WIZ. So I am the one and only lone wolf doing analyst relations. I absolutely love it. Something that would be really fun to chat about is that I have led big AR teams. I've been part of a big AR team and now back to doing AR as a solo practitioner, which I love. WIZ is in the cloud security space and it's a great company. I'm having such a wonderful experience here.
We're definitely going to get back to that big company, small company, big company, solo practitioner. But Crystal, you always get us started so well with your question, so I'm going to hand it to you.
So, Alyssa, as you and folks at TuneIn know, I love to ask, how do you think AR started, and or who do you think was the first person to practice analyst relations?
Super interesting. So I've been asked about the history of analyst firms before, how they came about. To my understanding, it was actually IDC in the 60s who was the very first firm to start doing market research, and then Yankee Group in, kind of the later 60s, early 70s, and then Gideon Gartner in 1979. So my sense is that once these analyst firms started popping up, companies realized, wow, they're advising buyers. They are writing reports that are really influential in the market. We need someone who is driving these discussions with them and who is helping them to understand what our company is doing. And wow, we could benefit from asking, them for advice. So my sense is the first AR practitioner started in probably the early, I would guess from a company like an IBM. I think they were kind of noted as the first.
That seems to be the consensus. It seems to be the consensus that a lot of people tend to think it's IBM.
Maybe where we need to reach out to IBM and ask for comment. Did you have the first AR program?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I'll be tuning into future episodes to see if you can confirm that. But that's my strong sense.
Yeah.
I also like that, Alyssa, you came with your homework done and had very clear and definitive dates. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be a fun journey if we can actually triangulate the first, probably have to be cluster of people, right? Because who knows? Yeah.
Maybe a fun way to take this then, since we've all kind of agreed on a consensus that it was likely IBM or one of the mainframe companies, our tech legacy giants, so to speak. You said you've been at a variety of companies. You have a specialty in cybersecurity for sure, right? Having been at Okta and now WIZ, kind of the darling of the cloud security world. What has been, and this is going to be really open-ended, so run with it however you want to, what has been your learning kind of across your analyst relations career? Or, what's been kind of the consistent thread, even as you jump companies?
Absolutely. And it's a great question. I think relationships matter, long-term relationships and people. It's one of the reasons I love analyst relations so much. And also one of the reasons why I think that I will make AR practitioners better at their jobs and more efficient. But AI will never replace AR. I think of some relationships that I've had for 20 plus years with analysts who I've worked with at different companies and who I really respect. And then if I think about even just our AR community is so special, and some of the relationships that you form with the teams that you work with, and even with your competitors, and talking about the evolution of AR is so exciting. So I think it's those long-term relationships, those conversations you have, either if it's over a boardroom table and you're getting a great insight from an analyst, and then you can drive that back to your product leaders, or maybe something that you learn about their family that you have a connection with over a dinner. That's what makes AR so exciting and so meaningful, is bridging that, that curiosity and relationship building and insight sharing. And that's something that's done through through people and done once you build that trusted relationship. And that's what makes analyst relations such an exciting field. And I think something that a lot of people have made a career out of.
So I'll take you back to something you said in there that's really interesting about the community with your competitors. I don't see many other communities, many other parts of the tech industry where analyst relations people will kind of collaborate with their direct competitor and share notes and share experiences and share names of analysts that they're working with. I don't see that level of collaboration anywhere else happening in the industry.
I agree with you. And I'll also say, Stephen, what's interesting is that I find that analysts themselves, even covering the same space from really competitive firms, are also friendly and have a community. So there's certain places you're not going to go. Like, I'm not going to talk to one of my fiercest competitors, obviously, about roadmap and where the market is headed, or kind of this great insight that we got from an analyst and then how we changed our messaging based on it. Likewise, I don't think analysts are going to ask their deepest question in a field of their competitors at like an analyst day. But there's a sense of community and a sense of working together to make this profession, whether it's analyst relations or the industry analyst landscape, just richer and trading
100%.
insights back and forth. And I love that. I used to think, oh my goodness, it's going to be so uncomfortable if I bring analysts together in one room for an analyst day. Like, should I separate them? And they're going up and hugging each other and asking about their kids graduating from college. And I think it's
100%. 100%.
To speak to that, Alyssa, I think one of the interesting things I saw at Mobile World Congress is we had a mixer. And I was introducing analysts to analysts. They'd never spoken to one another before. But then they just went off on their own little tangent and they're having their own conversation, making connections. Like, that was fun for me as an AR practitioner to kind of flip the script a little bit and see those little communities form or potentially form.
I mean, shout out to a couple of my friends in the community, Brent Ellis. Brent Ellis and Brent's from Forrester. He's probably one of the best infrastructure analysts out there. So shout out to Brent. We worked out, was it last November, not this November that just gone, the one before, that we spent in a 6-week period more days together than we did with our respective partners. We're on a traveling sort of rotation of seeing infrastructure vendors and going to infrastructure events, that on the night that you guys don't organise a formal dinner, we just go out, a gang of us together, and normally Brent and I. So we had Matt Eastwood on the show. Matt's a dear friend of mine.
That is great.
I think you touch on something that will come out of a briefing with you guys at an event, and we'll go and have coffee. You've got us locked up somewhere. What are we going to talk about? We're going to go, did you buy that? Does that make sense? Were you getting that briefing? Does that roadmap resonate? We all talk about you amongst ourselves.
We do.
About us as well,
Yeah.
which is going to be fine.
I think what you're isolating. Oh, sorry, Crystal.
I was going to pull that because we talk a lot about AR and the analyst sort of world being kind of isolated in that there's oftentimes not a lot of redundancy, right? And so for the analysts, for your space, Stephen, right? You said there may be like one mainframe or infrastructure person on a whole team. And so you kind of have more in common with someone at another firm and you're going to see them more. And you see that a lot in analyst relations as well. Like, Nathan, you're on you've got Big Erickson and Little Erickson, right? But you all kind of work independently. So Alyssa, bringing it back to your experience,
Yeah.
Even on the bigger teams, there's still that kind of isolation, right? Where, you have your lane and you're working through it, even though you could be embedded in a larger team.
No, absolutely. And it's a great topic that I know, Stephen, you touched on earlier too, which is different kinds of AR jobs in your AR team at your company, and then kind of the wider AR community. Mm-hmm. So for me, I started out at Ariba, and it was like when the market had just crashed, the .com bubble burst, and I learned AR before I had even walked in college graduation, which was super interesting. And I found it early and absolutely love it. And I learned under a gentleman named Kevin Brooks, who's now a marketing executive, who was great. But pretty quickly, I became like the solo AR practitioner. And I found that having that community and getting to know other AR professionals is so important, because you discuss best practices or what's happening at this firm, or I'm having a tough time with this, or have you discovered this analyst yet? They're up and coming. We just got great insights. And being able to discuss that as a community and, at times come together if there is an issue and say, can we go to the analyst firm and talk about this together as a community, that we're having a challenge with this. I found that community is so important externally when you're that individual practitioner. And then I went over to SAP, and I was there for 13 years. And I was a solo practitioner, like within different business units a lot. So Crystal, as you mentioned, like I would be the only person working on database analyst relations. And you would have a great AR team, but also so important to have that relationship with other AR professionals who cover databases and, work with the same analysts and are working with the same kind of dynamics and working on the same reports. I loved working for SAP, and I loved like leading a big AR team. And that was so fun, because then you also have your AR community within your own company. And then I went over to xOkta, which was super different, really, really fast paced, a lot of fun. And I had a small core AR team. We became so close that they are like my second family. Like we now all work at different companies. We're all leading different AR programs, and we text almost daily. I think you go through a lot in analyst relations, and my sense is that in analyst firms too, where you're working on like some really big, high pressure reports, evaluations, maybe, analysts being involved in a deal, like it's a lot of pressure on you. And I think you really bond together as a team doing that. So it was interesting for me then becoming a solo practitioner again for WIZ and like starting an analyst program for them, because I have my community, but now my community is different. So I'm actually part of a product marketing team, which I love. Like I'm doing AR as that solo practitioner, but my day-to-day team who I work with and have team calls with are really, really knowledgeable, in-depth product experts. So I'm hearing about the roadmap and what's happening in the product and great new customer wins and the new innovations like daily. So I'm almost embedded there. But because I'm a solo practitioner, having that outside AR community to discuss best practices, what's happening at the firms, that's more important, more important than ever. So I think there's so many different kinds of AR roles and different ways that community makes an impact on you depending on your role. And that was a lot. So I'm going to take a sip of coffee.
That's a really great question, I think, Alyssa. And we've not pulled on it on a thread yet. And I see, Nathan, you've probably got something in your mind, so I'll go quick. Where, in your opinion, should AR report up to? Should it go into comms? Should it go into PR? Should it go into IR? Should it go into product marketing? Should it go directly into the CMO? Kind of where do you think it should go up into the organization? I think analyst relations, in my experience, I literally just got off a briefing with the CEO of a mid-sized software company. It's pretty rarefied air that analyst relations, you don't put some fields as sales engineer on with a Gartner analyst. You're typically putting your most senior leaders, your most senior. So it's kind of rarefied air that we're all operating in. So the reporting structure is important. So long rambling question, but where do you think it should fit?
Absolutely.
Based on your experience?
So I'll answer that. And then I want to agree and disagree with you about the CEO and about like the solutions engineer. I think that's super interesting question and point too.
Up for disagreement, that makes for a good podcast.
I love that. That makes a fun discussion, right? So where AR should fit, this is going to sound like kind of a generic answer, but I think it really depends on the organization. I think in a very product-led, fast-paced company where you're like just doing a lot of innovation, I think product marketing makes perfect sense. So that's where I am at WIZ. Like I need to be in daily discussions about what the next innovation is going to be, what we're building into the product, the spaces that we're getting into, so that I can advise the team. Also, when we do big evaluations, it isn't like I'm doing the evaluation on my own. It's the whole team is working on it together. So I think that really makes sense, especially in a really product-driven company. I think in like a larger mega vendor, like we'll take, an SAP or an AWS or a Microsoft or an Oracle, like, a big company. I think it makes sense for AR as a team to report up into marketing or into communications. But I think whether it's in marketing or comms, AR needs a seat at the table, and they need to be on that communications or marketing leadership team. I think that's incredibly important because AR adds so much value to those discussions about like, well, this is where the analysts see the market going. It isn't just a communications function. It's actually a very important input into marketing and communications. Like, have we thought about doing a campaign on this? Or have we thought about this message which really seemed to resonate with analysts? For some companies, I think like if they're in earlier stages, I think having AR roll up into strategy makes a lot of sense. If you're thinking about things like product market fit and category creation, then I think strategy makes a big difference. But no matter what, and this goes back to the area where I agree and I disagree with you on, Stephen, is I think successful AR programs need C-level executive support, and not just like an executive who will say, yay, I'm glad we're a leader in this evaluation, but an executive who will give you their time and who will give you time to sit back and actually listen and have a great analyst discussion. So I'm super lucky that in my role now, our co-founder and VP of product is an amazing spokesperson and also just a really curious person and a great listener. And so I have him spend a lot of time with analysts. He's the lead at my analyst day. He does a lot of inquiries with the analysts and advisory days. I think having that C-level support really helps drive that relationship, and then also make sure that if an analyst shares an insight, it gets back to the right people at the right level because they are in those, those C-suite meetings. But this is my one point where I disagree. I also think some of the best spokespeople are SEs. So there are some analysts who are going to be really technical, really want to get in and look at the product. And I've actually had SEs be some of my favorite spokespeople because they're not going to start with any slides. They're just going to say, okay, let me just show you a demo. And they're the ones who are in and out with the customers who can say, I was at a customer last week and like this really resonated with them and why. And I think having that combination of C-level spokespeople and then also those who are really in it every day with customers and prospects and can demo the product inside and out and have that like passion for the technology and that hands-on, I think they're really great spokespeople too.
Listen, I just want to echo that. I think as an AR practitioner, your bench of spokespeople has to be really deep and it has to be really intentional. I think one of the learnings that I could share kind of based off what you just said is I'm in cybersecurity in the sense that I represent our cybersecurity products within our business area of Ericsson. And one of the things I learned pretty quickly, along with our director of product marketing, because this was a new product market for us, is when we were approaching our briefings at Gartner, for example, those analysts are generally a little bit more technical. They were not buying what we were selling. And so we quickly pivoted. And my number one kind of constituency for those conversations now is an SE or somebody from our center of excellence who, like you said, can give a very crisp technical demo and then go 12 rounds with the analyst too.
Yes.
Because they're out there supporting sales. They're out there supporting implementation. They know the product better than anyone. They know the roadmap and they know the limitations and the realities.
I gotta say, it's so satisfying, Alyssa, to hear you talk about AR like this. And it's obviously a theme, I think, in a lot of our conversations. But in my, 9 to 5, if you will, whenever someone asks me a question, I'm always like, it depends, right? It's like, yes, and maybe not. And I know like, that's never satisfying to the recipient that wants a definitive thing, but that's so indicative of analyst relations and the analyst work, right? Because there are so many levers and variables that can be pulled or changed or whatever at any given moment. I feel like agility is really critical in executing and being just ready. Right.
I want to give kudos and ask a question related to what we've been discussing. Kudos for the fact that I had never heard somebody so clearly articulate some of the different considerations as far as when AR should report to what. And I think that's a roadmap item people can take from the conversation. The question I wanted to ask is based on your kind of varied career, so small company, independent practitioner, large company, independent practitioner, part of a larger team, how have your views or your beliefs or your strategies changed from company to company. Do you feel that you've kind of retained some of those central principles no matter where you've been at as they've evolved, or how has that changed?
Great question. And just like Crystal said, I think it varies a little bit. Some of the principles, and those will carry on with you from company to company, I've retained since day one, which are, it's just so important to be transparent and be ethical. And I also just think having a positive outlook and trying to find a great outcome for everyone is really important. Even if you're going into an escalation, a difficult situation, maybe a result that you don't love, or an analyst who is just fundamentally has a different belief than you do. I think stepping back, being curious, but then coming at it, trying to find, if not a mutual understanding, at least just really getting the other person's perspective and where they're coming from and approaching it positively. So that's something I've brought to every analyst role that I've been into. And I can think of very, very rare circumstances where you're not able to get something done by just having that, that positive attitude. And then I think also just the importance of being able to meld your communication style to the individual person and to the company. And that's why I think analyst relations is so fascinating. Like, you're going to work with an analyst who is really challenging and who is very metrics driven and very skeptical. You're going to work with them and bring a different spokesperson than you would for an analyst that is very relationship based and cares more about, okay, this is what customers are doing. Like, this is what I can share externally. These are the trends that I see that's really motivated from external forces versus like a skeptic who's motivated by metrics. So I think just bringing that experience you've had and that ability to kind of be a chameleon and go, okay, so this is what is going to be a successful interaction for this analyst, and this is going to help them achieve their objective. And so this is what we need to do to meet them where they are. I think those things follow you from company to company, but I think you also need to really have a deep curiosity for how to solve problems, how to solve them differently depending on your environment, and just to know that like the practices that you brought from a previous company may not work at other companies. But it's some of those like basic real core principles that I think you bring everywhere you are. And I think you see that in a lot of analyst relations professionals. Like, we all love to make connections, love to talk, are very curious, love to know what's going on, and I think are eager to listen to others and to try to understand, their perspectives.
I think there's a lot in that, Alyssa, and you didn't mention the way to work with Gartner is this, and the way to work with IDC is this, and the way to work with Omdia is that. It is at an individual analyst level.
Yes.
You can have 10 different personality types working for one analyst firm, and they all want to see different things. Their rubric of how they may evaluate vendors might be different. Obviously, that gets pretty formalized when you're into an MQ or a Wave or a MarketScape, but on the sort of ongoing interaction, you're going to see, as you say, a metrics-driven analyst who's only wants to see the numbers. There's a kind of vibe type analyst of like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing. How do you fit into that landscape? So I think, as Nathan says, it's fascinating to see that it is at a relationship level with that individual analyst. Obviously, they fit within a framework of a firm, but you've got to connect. It's always for me that relations is the second part of the job title. You've got to be tuned to it, and you're doing a better job of articulating it than I am. I mean, this is starting to lead on to where do you sit? You touched on AI. I think you said it perfectly, and we didn't drag you back to it. There's a discussion. Carter was pushing this out on LinkedIn today. There's an ongoing thread I think we're all having in the industry of kind of where does AI play a role and add value to the AR function? Mm-hmm. There's also does it replace it? ? Obviously, we think not. How are you seeing that kind of play out, especially in a fast-moving company where you're the solo practitioner? Probably AI is a cheat code for productivity. How are you seeing that play out?
Absolutely. And it's a question that so many AR professionals are having right now. So I admit I was a little bit skeptical about AI at first, but I think AI really helps to drive productivity, especially when it comes to repetitive evaluations. So something that we have a really tough time at, especially being in a hot area like, security, there's a ton of evaluations and we're asked a lot of really similar questions, and bandwidth is really tough, especially being a solo practitioner. And one of my core beliefs is like, I don't believe in doing anything in like kind of a half-assed way. Like if we're going to engage in something, we're really going to engage and, give you our best. And so AI has really helped me to get the basics of a questionnaire done. Like those quantitative stats, the what use cases do you solve? Getting all that done really quickly. So then I can go to the product leaders and say, okay, here are these really important 5 vision related questions. If you have any time for this evaluation, I want to work with you on this so we can really nail it. And then you submit something that is world class. But I don't think it's ever going to automate those really big questions. Something else I feel really strongly about is I don't record calls. I'm not going to record a call and somebody doesn't know about it. If somebody's recording a call, okay, like about it. I know this is being recorded right now. I gave my consent. But when I'm in an analyst engagement, I'm there, I'm engaged, I'm taking down the things that I think are important, and I am not going to, get a transcript and then analyze it later and then plan what I'm going to talk to you about based on AI analyzing it. Like you talked about the R in relationships and also talked about like that AR practitioner's role of knowing like what drives this analyst, what motivates them. You can physically see in a call with an analyst when they're leaning in, when they're checking out, like when they might be confused about something. Maybe you could do that through facial recognition, but I don't think we're there yet. And so for me, it's like automating the things that are like, okay, you need to do this. And then you're really engaged and really present and focusing on that. Like what is going to make this analyst successful? Like thinking myself, like not based on AI notes, but my own brain thinking, okay, what should the next step for this analyst be? Like, are they a little skeptical and would they need to talk to a customer, or are they going to need some more stats to back this up? Or should we bring them in earlier on the next product release so they can be part of it? It's that like gut instinct per person that I don't think AI is ever gonna replace and ever should.
I've got a
Alyssa.
terrible poker face when I'm on briefings. A terrible poker face. If you see me do
I love that.
if you see me do the tilt my head and stroke my sort of chin, it's like I'm not getting this. Something's and I joke about it, but AI's not going to. Well, I say AI's not going to pick it up. Zoom's going to do something, or Google Meet's going to do something. But I saw, Nathan, you were sort of keen to chime in there.
And I know Crystal wants to chime in too. So all I was going to say is I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think AI can generate insights when you care about quantity. What I have struggled with, and this could be user error. So if anyone is listening to this and is saying, you guys are wrong, let us know. But maybe I have too much belief in myself, but I have yet to be able to get AI to replicate the quality of insight I deliver from a company.
I agree.
Well, I love that you said that, because when you were talking about curiosity, Alyssa, that is the like magic part that we have. And like, how do you design that with math? Curiosity, right? And so maybe it'll be possible, but I think that is really one of the core things that we value in the human experience and the relationship building is our curiosity. And you could be talking about something and then it triggers an idea that loops it all together or takes it to the next level or identifies a flawed thinking based off of this passing reference, right? And I think that's the piece that, let's knock on wood, that makes us uniquely human, those nuances. And maybe there will be ways to identify the, pondering and all of this, but there is still this catalog of information that we as humans connect and triangulate that is totally spontaneous in some ways.
I think it's knowing where AI is going to add value. I was on with the product team this week and we were doing some advisory, and they need to go and research their competitors and go and build a sort of competitive analysis piece of work. We've got these 20 capabilities and this is their score out of 1 to 5. And we're talking about this piece of work. And the guys went, do you think we should use AI? I'm like, absolutely, you should start with AI. Starting with a Google search, like we would have done 3 years ago. That's a 3-week task, and it's going to take an army of you.
Save a bottle of water first.
Yeah. I mean, but now it's you cut the first 2 weeks of that project off with some good prompts, but you don't cut all the project off.
No.
The product manager who knows his product, in this case, he who knows his product deeply, got it nailed, been in it for the last 6 or 7 years, he's still going to have to go through, fact check the LLM, go and spend a week in the citations, following the breadcrumbs. So what we've done is we've taken a 3-week project and given it a 1-week turnaround, not a 3-week turnaround, but the human's still very much in the loop. So yes, we've got a cheat code and we've unlocked some productivity. And I think that's how I look at it. It's a cheat code. It's not a either or a replacement for. Are you seeing the same, Alyssa?
No, I do see the same. And I think also with fast-paced companies, like we're not doing analyst evaluations every week. Like we usually have a few that are ongoing, but only that product managers can be able to say, so what's the cutoff date for this evaluation? Because we have a feature that's going to be coming out in about 2 weeks. And so if we can say, okay, this is going to be published in August, we'll tell them, under NDA for now, but this feature will be coming out. That's not something that AI can pick up. And I also think analyst firms are going to get really sick of seeing evaluations that they can tell were just through AI and that are pretty generic.
We've got to go through that journey yet, though. That is ahead of us. That is not.
Yes.
I think that's the next 18 months. I don't think we're going to go through the pain and then come out the other side.
But it's why it's so important to differentiate those big questions and put, an individual executive or product manager's, voice behind it and talk about what's happening, in the future. So it helps. But to me, it helps you focus on the really, really important stuff and have time for that and not as much copying and pasting and sifting through all of the evaluation surveys you've done before.
Yeah, 100%.
But
so, Alyssa,
Stephen,
go ahead, Nathan.
I was just going to say you're spot on. It's something we haven't dealt with yet. Whether it's 18 months, 2 years, a lot of that depends on, I think, AI usage guidelines for independent companies, standing up your own internal models. Something within the next 5 years, for sure, that we are going to have to deal with from both aspects, from analyst firms using AI and vendors using AI to complete something like an evaluation.
Well, you're going to see the evaluation change. Somebody sending out 500 questions in a big MQ. If you know you're going to get 480 of those with LLM generated answers, why don't you just go and find that information directly from the LLM yourself?
You're also posing something interesting, which is, could the nature of a Magic Quadrant RFI change? What is truly important? If you can find most of this information from your internal databases that you've compiled over the years, maybe those 5 questions about vision, differentiation, and competitive advantage, maybe those are actually the most important. And maybe for the better, that changes some of these RFIs because they have gotten burdensome, which is fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, 480 of the questions can be answered via an LLM. Why are you asking them?
Right.
I do think it's those big open-ended questions that are really the differentiators. The analysts are also human. It's also so much more interesting and engaging to read, and you get to know, the company's priorities and what they're passionate about. You get to know that through those big open-ended questions, not the first 480. And I can understand why it's important to have that apples to apples on a lot of these aspects that are obviously important to end user clients, or they wouldn't, be asking them. But I agree, the differentiation is in the big vision questions, and then of course through the live briefing and the demo that I don't think AI has really impacted very much yet.
So Alyssa, as the host this week, I got to keep us on track somehow. Well, I've just noticed the time and I'm completely lost in the conversation, so that's on me. This is fascinating, and I think we're definitely going to have you on as another guest in the future, because this is some of the trends and the arcs that we're talking about. It's good to circle back on sort of 6-9 months from now and see how things are changing, as I frantically try and make sure we stay on time and don't record a 2-hour podcast. Where do you see this industry going? We were asking this question of all of our guests. I think we've talked about some of it today and some of those trend lines, but if we get you to sort of peer into the mists in your crystal ball, where do you see us going 3, 4, 5 years out?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I see analyst relations becoming even more strategic than it is now. I see analyst relations as a whole being a really sought after profession. I've now had so many more people ask me who are like new graduates who are, in other areas of, marketing or communications or even product, ask about analyst relations. So I really see us continuing to evolve that. I see AR becoming an even more important advisor to product teams and to the C-suite. And I, just like we talked about before, I see the differentiation really being in those human relationships and those individuals who prioritize getting to know someone and their motivations and what makes them successful. I think that's really going to make or break AR and make or break reputations, is those people who pivot way too hard on AI and then kind of neglect the human element a little bit, and the companies who do that versus the companies that understand how AI can make things efficient. But in the end, what makes you recommend a company as an analyst is that you trust them and you know their vision and you trust their executive team, and you don't get that through AI. So I think this AI trend is going to be, yes, very important, but the companies who really understand and embrace that human element and keep up that C-level interaction and really listening to analysts, meeting them in person, I think that's going to really differentiate the good from the really, great analyst relations leaders who are out there.
Guys, I don't think we can finish any better than that. You've been listening to another episode of ARChat, brought to you by me, your host this week, Stephen Dickens, Crystal Golightly and Nathan Herman. We've had Alyssa Stone on the show. If you like what you hear, please click, subscribe, share with your friends, do all those things, because it helps us grow this audience and this community. But come back. We'll be recording these every 2 weeks, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.
Thanks, everyone.